any circumstance. If someone was threatening your friends or your family over something super trivial, would you be willing just to tell that one lie in order to avoid that circumstance? And Peterson just doesn't want to answer that question. Now, I must say, having sat across from Peterson a few times, I can tell when he's starting to get kind of irked, I think, and here he does look a little bit angry.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
It seems like he's getting a little bit irritated by this conversation, and it's not entirely clear why. I mean, I don't think this guy's being rude. I don't think he's being unreasonable. I think he's asking important, clarifying questions. And Peterson seems quite hostile in response. But anyway, Peterson says here that if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to be in the kind of circumstance where you need to lie in order to save your family. But I thought the point of Christianity was that it offered redemption from sin. Like, yeah, suppose your entire life had been lived steeped in sin, but then you discover Jesus, then you discover the possibility for redemption. So you become a Christian, you ask for forgiveness, you repent of your sins. This guy's just saying, look, Dr. Peterson, if you were in a situation where you had to lie to save your family, what would you do? And Dr. Peterson says, well, I think you'd already have to be pretty steeped in sin to be in that circumstance. Okay, yeah, maybe you are, but then suppose you ask for forgiveness for those sins, which is kind of what Christianity is all about. If you are now in a situation where you had to lie to save your family, would you do it? Again, Peterson just doesn't want to answer this.
I'll give you an example. If you're in Nazi Germany, and it's the case that there's Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them, would you lie to the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation.
So then that would include lying.
It's not answerable. No, I can't answer a hypothetical like that because it's not. Look, don't play games.
I'm playing games.
Yes, you are. If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation.
This is really strange to me because this is just a bog-standard philosophical thought experiment. If you are hiding Jews in your attic and the Nazis come to your door, do you lie about it? Peterson's answer, curiously, is just to say, well, I don't think I'd be in that situation because I will have done everything I could to avoid it. But okay, suppose you did everything you could to avoid it and you failed somehow. Maybe it's not your fault individually. Maybe you grew up in Nazi Germany and you tried your best to stop the onslaught of fascism, but you just couldn't do it. You weren't powerful enough. Now you're in this situation. What do you do?
By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do.
Okay. So, in this, in the actual model's picture, the background is jungle and sky over here. And he's being lit from this angle, from the above. Now, I have no idea of what to do with the background. I want to keep the lighting. So value-wise, I'm going to follow what I see. But color-wise, I'm not sure about a greenish surrounding. But, okay. So that's already good information because value holds more of the composition in its grip than hues. So that's already a good start for me to have a vision of the values that I'm going to go for, but still doesn't solve the hue problem. I'm ultimately dealing with paint, so I have to pick a hue. Maybe I can address it by deconstructing it into its elements, which would be, well, value-wise, it's solved. What about saturation? How saturated I want it to be? Okay. How saturated? Not saturated, that's for sure. But how not saturated exactly? How gray I'm going to go for. Maybe if I go with, it's actually in the actual model, it's a greenish gray. But, okay, I think about it. It's also the fact that background is not something separate. So I might as well go with the skin tone that is less saturated and still have a saturated light only. So it might be both, but I don't know yet. I think that would reveal itself to me as I develop more the figure itself. We'll see.
Okay, but suppose you made those mistakes, and then you realize, oh gosh, I've made such a terrible mistake. From now on, I want to be the best person I can be. I want to be as moral going forward as I can be to make up for my past mistakes. Which, by the way, is like Peterson's whole thing. You know, making small moral improvements day by day to better yourself as a person, while recognizing that moral perfection is impossible to immediately achieve, and so just making sure that you're doing better today than you were yesterday. I thought that was like his whole message. All we're asking here is, how do we apply that philosophy to a situation like this, where you are steeped in sin, but now want to be a better person? And then Peterson has quite a visceral reaction to answering this hypothetical.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have, and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position. Because
I
you don't
did
like. Are you
clarify.
like uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask you.
It's just a basic
Yeah,
hypothetical
like,
where you're
like
you
if you-
put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just a basic hypothetical.
Obviously, you.
Oh man, that's just so unfair. Like, you know, the way he's just said,
What's wrong
oh,
with
really,
him?
it's just a basic hypothetical? You put Jews' lives at risk and that's just a basic hypothetical to you? Clearly what this guy means is it's a basic hypothetical in that it's morally basic, in that it should be relatively obvious. Like, suppose we were having a debate about whether morality exists or not, and I said, well, here's a basic hypothetical. Suppose someone were torturing innocent babies for fun. Would that be wrong? That's just like a basic hypothetical in the sense that it should be relatively basic for you to answer. It would be so unfair to turn around and go, oh, that's just a basic example, is it? Torturing babies for fun, that's just a basic hypothetical for you? Like, yeah, it's basic in the sense that it's morally obvious. That's why these kinds of thought experiments are invented in the first place. And despite having that quite emotive reaction to this basic hypothetical, Peterson knows that it's just a basic bog standard hypothetical. Because listen to what he says earlier when the guy originally brings it up.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic, and you're trying to protect them, would you?
Yeah, I know the example. That's quite a dismissive way to talk about this issue. I mean, we're talking about Jewish lives being at stake in Nazi Germany, and you're just like, oh yeah, I know that example. Yeah, because the
It's
sense
just
in which you dismiss
adjectives
this
and
by saying,
defensive.
yeah, I've heard of this argument, is not you dismissing the moral seriousness
At
of
that
the
point.
situation, but you dismissing the utility of this thought experiment. In the same way, this guy saying that it's just a basic hypothetical is not him saying that there's no moral seriousness in the situation, but rather that the morality of the situation is quite basic and straightforward.
Obviously, you would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question
What's
for some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Like, so you're
Why are you
anti-fascist?
asking that?
I was just asking, just clarifying. But like, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's
manner
not
you
what it
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about you.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
So it does seem like there's some kind of cut there, but Peterson just keeps saying, well, I just wouldn't be in that situation. But firstly, I don't think you can know that. Secondly, Christianity is all about people who find themselves in these kinds of situations where they're responsible for things they regret and now want to act morally. And thirdly, what if it's like somebody else? Then the moral question just becomes, what should they do? And you can't answer that by saying, well, they just wouldn't find themselves in that situation, because some people did. Anyway, that basically concludes this debate about the ethics of lying, although it's not so much a debate when Dr. Peterson is unwilling to offer his opinion on the matter. Like, he doesn't even say it would be wrong to lie, or I think it would be okay to lie. He just says, I wouldn't be in that situation, and I refuse to engage with the hypothetical. But even so, this entire discussion is also based on a faulty premise, that if you believe something, but you're willing to lie about it, that somehow means that you don't believe it anymore? And even that was a tangent from the original question, which was, of course, does Jordan Peterson believe in the all-powerful, all-loving conception of God, which we still haven't even come close to so much as approximating an answer to. Now, the next person Peterson talks to is later chosen by him as his favourite conversation to be revisited later, and I can see why. She's obviously put some effort into understanding his religious views, and asks, I think, some really interesting philosophical questions.
My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
Hi,
Good work.
thank you.
Hi there.
I'm Zena. So I want to start off with like defining terms.
Yeah.
How do you define worship?
Prioritize.
Prioritize. So almost like having a preference over something rather than the
It's
other.
a hierarchy of preferences,
Yeah.
and you use it to direct your attention.
Right.
So whatever you're attending to, you're worshiping.
Right. So I've kind
Okay.
of become a little bit familiar with your idea of like this value-laden hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right. And you kind of posit that at the bottom of this hierarchy, or you call it top or bottom, I
Yeah,
suppose. At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. I'm trying to imagine a situation in which could there be that someone has a priority at their foundation that is different from someone else's?
Oh, definitely.
Right. So we can have different conceptions of God.
That's why we fight.
Right. So essentially, there's not one God, but there are multiple gods, and these gods exist in some realm of truth.
Okay, so right off the bat, a brilliant question. Remember, for Peterson, God is just defined as whatever is at the base of the value hierarchy, the fundamental value. This woman, Zena, has asked, can't people have different fundamental values? Peterson says, yes, of course. But if God is just defined as that fundamental value, that means that there are lots of different gods. Remember, for Peterson, God is not just the justification for that basic value or something. God is the basic value. Insofar as God exists,
As far as I know,
it's
debate
just
is
that
over.
fundamental value.
He admitted
So if
it
there
doesn't
are different
exist.
fundamental values, it seems like there really exist different gods, at least in the sense of exist that Jordan Peterson would apply to God. But presumably Jordan Peterson is not a polytheist. He believes in one God if he believes in a God at all. And so how can he account for the fact that there are various fundamental values and yet presumably only one actual God?
So essentially, there's not one God, but there are multiple gods, and these gods exist in some realm of truth. It's true that this person has one God and it exists.
Yeah, probably better to think about it as multiple values, but that there's a hierarchy
Okay.
of values with something at the bottom.
Well, hold on, it's not better to just think of that as a value, because that fundamental value is God. I thought we made that a matter of definition.
Right, but the bottom is God, and there
That's
are
a definition, yeah.
yeah. So at the bottom is God, and
Yeah.
there can be multiple people with different conceptions of God, and they're each valid in being called God. So there are multiple gods that exist.
Mm,
Yeah, if God just is that foundation, then
I
we've now
don't
got
think he
multiple
would
gods, and we
deny
need to
that.
account for that. Okay, this is where it's about to get really interesting.
It depends on what you mean by valid. So far, so good, but it depends on what you mean by valid, because I would say that some foundational conceptions don't play out when they're implemented. So if you put the wrong thing at the foundation, you end up in hell.
Okay, so there are right and wrong fundamental values. How do we determine what is a right fundamental value and what is a wrong fundamental value?
So you're
So
saying
they're not all equal. Like all foundational principles are not equal, even though they might be equally foundational, right?
So what makes one kind of foundational tenet like better than another one?
That's an excellent question.
I agree. In fact, I think that's the most important question anyone has asked so far.
Iterability. Imagine that you play a game with someone and you're a kid, and it's fun. So then you play again and again and again.
So repetition.
It's playability across multiple iterations. So then you have a friend. The friend is better than having a game.
So
Right? So that's one.
Okay, so iterability is one thing that we can use to judge whether a fundamental value is a
Okay.
good fundamental value or a bad fundamental value.
Okay.
But hold on, doesn't that mean we need to value iterability? And we need to use that
Then
value of
iterability
iterability to
is
judge what I thought was supposed to be our fundamental value. If the value is fundamental, that means that it's at the bottom or the top of this value hierarchy. So how can there be a more fundamental value, that is iterability, by which we can then judge that fundamental value? Like seriously, think about this for a moment. We're dealing with the problem of multiple different fundamental values.
could there be that someone has a priority at their foundation that is different from someone else's?
Oh, definitely.
A fundamental value is the most basic value that everything else is oriented towards. If it's the most fundamental value, then you can't have other values by which you judge if it's a good or a bad fundamental value.
Breadth of application is another. So if it's just for me now, it's not as good as something that would be benefit to both of us across time.
Okay, so Peterson also values breadth of application, but that's also a value. Like these are all values, iterability, breadth of application, that we're using to judge whether another value is good or bad. But if we're using, say, breadth of application and iterability, these values, to judge some other value x, then that value x is not fundamental, because we're using something more fundamental to judge whether it's valid or not. That means that those are our most fundamental values. Does that mean that they are God? Like iterability and breadth of application just are what God is? Well, that's obviously not right. So what's going on here? If Peterson defines God as a fundamental value, the characteristic quality of a fundamental value is that it's fundamental. It's where the buck stops. You can't get there to the fundamental value and say, well, we've got this other set of values which we'll use to judge whether it's good or bad. That means it's not fundamental.
Right, so we're explaining like characteristics that can be applied to like these types of like foundational values. But why is it that this iterability makes it better, and what does better mean?
Exactly. If you've got two people and they've both got fundamental values which conflict with each other, why does iterability make one of them good? And why does not having iterability
I think
make the other
it
one
would
bad?
make
It seems like it's only
it
two
better
options
for
here
more
to say
people.
that value is still God, but there is some more fundamental value by which we can judge whether somebody's sort of got the right God or not, and that would mean that God is not the most fundamental value in the hierarchy, which would contradict his definition of God that he gave earlier. Or he can say, okay, then that more fundamental value judgment is what God is. But when asked to list some examples, he gave iterability and breadth of application, which don't sound like great definitions of God. Either way, we've got a very serious problem here, and there might be an answer to it, but I'm not hearing a strong one from Jordan Peterson right now. I mean, take a look at this moment, and remember, we've just established that there are some fundamental values which are valid, and therefore approximate God, and some which are invalid, and therefore they don't approximate God.
So I'm essentially trying to figure out, do you believe that something can be good, like stance independently, something that can be good?
I don't know what you mean by stance independent.
Okay, so
you
I
mean
mean-
independent of people?
Independent of people, we can use that, or more so, I want to be more specific, something that can be good, right, regardless of any end goal. It's just good.
No, I think good is tied up with goal.
Goal, okay, I completely agree. So, in a sense, this is why...
That's why the religious goal in Christianity is the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's goal dependent.
Okay, right.
So it's in reference to a goal.
So,
Or the goal would be the
but
imitation of Christ.
someone's goal, right, can be something that doesn't encompass being in congruence with God or being with God.
Yeah, so someone's ultimate goal could be invalid and therefore not congruous with God, right?
No, the thing that they want to be in
Oh, right, right, okay.
Hang on a second. That's right. That's
Sorry,
right. That's
sorry,
right.
I
That's good.
corrected
That's good. The thing they want to be in congruence with is fundamentally equivalent to their
So-
God.
Oh, so we're now back to the idea that somebody's ultimate goal just is God. I mean, he did say their God, which could imply that different people have different gods.
Is fundamentally equivalent to their
So-
God.
But again, he's just stuck with this dilemma that he has to say either they're all equally legitimate gods, in which case there are just lots of gods that exist, or he has to say, well, their God is the wrong God, and we're back to the problem of having to judge what is supposed to be our most fundamental value, God, with reference to other more fundamental values.
My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories.
Okay.
It's very nice to meet you.
What's
I'm
your
Ian.
name?
I'm Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Yes. So God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers. Like, is all of this in line with Christian ethics?
Okay, we're back to slavery, and this time with genocide as well. My favorite subject in the context of the Hebrew Bible. That's what I mean by that.
Is all of this in line with Christian ethics?
No.
So then God doesn't fit within Christian ethics.
This is, I think, a simple but valid point, and despite all of the debates I've had about this, I haven't had a satisfactory answer. God commands the slaughter of
isn't.
innocent children. Children we know are innocent, non-combatants, non-combatant women as well, not to mention animals for some reason too. And the question is, why would God command such acts of seeming genocide? This was actually one of my prompts when I was doing the surrounded thing for Jubilee. I said that God commands genocide in the Old Testament, and Christian responses responses to this vary because, the text is there, it's quite clear. But some Christians say it's an exaggeration.
They could have
say
fucking
that God
edited
didn't really
out.
want the Israelites to wipe everyone out. He was just using exaggerated war rhetoric. Others might just be more liberal about scripture. They say these things just didn't happen or were misreported. But some just say, yeah, God commanded the slaughter of children and he had every right to because, he's God, so why not? That's the line that, for instance, William Lane Craig took when I interviewed him about this problem. And look, if you want to see somebody just own an unfathomably unintuitive moral conclusion,
at least he fucking
grab some
own
popcorn
it.
and stick that episode on.
It was actually a tremendous blessing to these children for them to be killed and go to heaven and be with God.
Here you go. At
You
least
must
he's
understand
honest.
how that sounds. But let's see what response Dr. Peterson chooses.
Well, the biblical library is a continuing story, and everything written in it has to be contextualized by the entire text. There's 65,000 hyperlinks in the biblical text. And you can take pieces of it out of context and criticize them, and that's what you're doing. But that's a mistake. I think it's an analytic mistake because you're putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, so I do agree that it's really important to contextualize, particularly biblical stories. But before we do that, I always like to ask somebody, okay, what is the kind of context you think could exist that would justify God commanding the slaughter of innocent children and non-combatant women and non-combatant men, like the disabled, as well as the animals that also live in that area? Like, what kind of context do you think could justify that? We're told that these Canaanite tribes are deeply immoral and have been in their sin for hundreds of years, but we also know that the children are slaughtered. Unless you just want to say that, well, the children deserved it too, which maybe you think. A lot of Christians think that people are just born in sin. But why do the Canaanites deserve that more than any other tribe? Like when you're talking about that individual child, they've committed no more or less sin than an Israelite child of the same age, if we're talking about like infants. And yet when the Israelites are sinful, God sends them a messenger with literal stone tablets guiding them to the truth and giving them a promised land. When the Canaanites sin, they don't get that same moral guidance. They get the Israelites coming in and slaughtering the men, women, children, and animals. It just doesn't seem that fair intuitively. So again, I understand that we need to contextualize these stories, but what kind of context do you think provides a moral justification for commanding the slaughter of non-combatant children?
I really don't think so. I think that if we say that something is Christian ethics, then I think that all of the books, essentially Christianity, would fit with it, especially if it's like the main character. When we're talking
How do you
about
deal with
God,
the morality of war?
So
How do you think you should deal with the
Sure.
The morality of war is a complicated and deep issue, ethically speaking, but I think most people are agreed that you shouldn't, command the slaughter of children. And we're not talking about children dying as accidental collateral victims of a greater war. We're not even talking about a nation intentionally killing children, but at least saying that it was an accident. We're talking about God proactively commanding the slaughter of these children, like on purpose. I don't know, Dr. Peterson, I kind of want you to tell us what kind of just war theory could incorporate such a command. Now, before we move on, I just want you to sit and think to yourself for a moment. Do you think this guy's being rude? Like the guy who's just sat down to talk to Jordan Peterson. I mean, they're trying to get their point across, and they're trying to do it quickly. I've been in that situation, I know how difficult that is. But do you think he's being rude? Do you think he's being purposefully obtuse or playing games? Doesn't seem that way to me, but look how this conversation unfolds.
because I feel like the morality, like I feel like Christian ethics, like this is kind of, I guess I just think it's like kind of an absurdity to say that God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, but sure, well, we can go on my ethics, that's totally fine.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing with?
So Peterson wants to know what game this guy's playing with that question. And, this guy might not be formulating his thoughts as clearly as he could. It's a difficult and quite brave thing to do on a platform like this. But it doesn't seem to me like he's playing games.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing with?
Well, I just think that it's an absurdity to say that the Christian God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, that like the Christian God isn't like Christian
I
ethical.
said that the specific statements that you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is faulty.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go to
Thank
the
you.
Like, okay, I can understand why it might be frustrating when it feels like somebody isn't understanding you or isn't listening to you properly, but I
Fucking
don't
the
think this guy is
adult.
doing anything that warrants that kind of anger from Jordan Peterson. And Peterson is upset that he's putting words in his mouth because he said, well, I think it's an absurdity to say that God doesn't fit within Christian ethics. And Peterson says, well, I never said that. Of course, she never said that. The point is, he's trying to argue that that's the implication of your worldview. It's a bit like if Jordan Peterson says, well, you know, you're an atheist, but you do worship something. And I said, hey, don't put words in my mouth. I never said that. That would be a totally inappropriate response. Like, yeah, of course I didn't say those words, but it's still your view that that's what I'm doing. The point is not that I'm trying to express your views in your own words, but I'm trying to tell you what I think are some implications of what you're saying. I mean, yeah, like if somebody is intentionally ascribing views to you that you just don't hold, that's one thing. That might be putting words in your mouth, but it just doesn't seem like that's what this guy's doing here.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through the example. Yeah, so, and I apologize. So let's go through the example. So in 1 Samuel 15:3, God says, go and slaughter the Amalekites, slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants.
Hey, don't forget about the animals. He also says to slaughter the cattle, the sheep, the camels, and the donkeys.
What's the justification for that? Is that in line
That's a
with
good
Christian
question.
ethics?
That's a good question. I don't really know what to do with the terrible, blood-soaked, saturated history of the human past. I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, but this isn't just a record of history,
Yeah,
is
it's
it?
not
It's not
that.
just the Bible saying, here's something that
It's a
happened.
command.
This is a report of a command that God gave through one of his chosen prophets to one of his chosen kings over his chosen people, which isn't quite the same thing.
What you try to do in your own life, as far as I can tell, is to conduct yourself in a manner that makes such things much more unlikely.
I totally agree.
We're all saddled with the problem of the catastrophes that got us here, aren't we?
Yeah, but this one was commanded by God. That's the problem. That's what differentiates it from anything else, is that this one, it's God saying, go and do this atrocity.
Do you think that there's ever such a thing as a righteous war?
Again, I think Peterson is evading the important question. The question is not
That's
about
his
the ethics of
method.
war more broadly, but specifically about this command to slaughter children, and of course, animals. Like, yeah, I get the point here. There are some wars that are just and some that are unjust, and exactly how we work out which is quite murky. But I think we can all be in rough agreement here that the intentional slaughter of children is not just. And if that's the case, how can we account for God commanding this specifically in 1 Samuel chapter 15?
God saying, go and do this atrocity.
Do you think that there's ever such a thing as a righteous war?
I'm skeptical. I'm not sure. It would probably be situational.
Well, right, fair
Yeah,
enough.
but
I
this
mean,
one
people-
certainly wasn't a just war. The context for the Amalekite slaughter is that 400 years earlier, they fought one battle, which they lost, and God says, that's it, I'm going to wipe them off the face of the goddamn earth. And then 400 years later, he commands the Israelites to genocide their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's not a just war at all. And also, a genocide is not a war.
Well, a genocide can be a war, but
Absolutely not.
Yep.
The genociding of the Amalekites, the men, the women, and the infants, that's not a war. The infants aren't combatants.
look, I already said that it's very difficult to look at the blood-soaked past and to know exactly what to do about it. The answer I gave to the gentleman who was sitting here before you is that it's necessary to read a text like the Bible at all of its levels of analysis simultaneously. And there's a directional morality that emerges across time that has its roots in the Old Testament, for example, with its restrictions against murder specifically, that makes itself manifest in the Christian texts as the insistence on voluntary self-sacrifice as the foundational belief. That's a profoundly anti-violence ethos.
Okay, but the problem
Oh,
is, even
wow.
if there is some kind
Fucking
of moral
slow clap.
trajectory to the Bible for some reason, the idea that an all-loving God would proactively command something which is evil just seems conceptually incoherent. And so we have to tackle this problem head on. And of course, I completely understand why somebody would just say, I don't know, it's an incredibly complicated issue. But I do think it's quite telling that when faced with a command to slaughter innocent children and non-combatant men and women, and animals, somebody has to say, yeah, I'm not really sure about that. I'm not sure if it was right or wrong, or if it was wrong, how it was wrong, and maybe there was some kind of justification. I mean, maybe there was, but you can understand why that would be pretty uncompelling to the atheists in the room.
Do you have the belief in your theology?
Well, what do you think of that? Wait a sec. Now, redress
So
what I
yeah,
just
so
said.
I'm about to address it, but I'm addressing it with a question. Do you think that God is by his very essence perfect?
You'll have to provide more.
Sure, just like maximally great and all like the
think there's
great
a
making
definition.
qualities.
Sure.
Yeah,
By
like
definition.
flawless. Yeah. So
Okay, so
does a
wait a
flawless
sec,
thing
wait a
change?
sec.
Does a flawless thing reveal like more and better information over time, or would a flawless thing say, here's what's good, here's the absolute good thing to do at all circumstances in time?
Well, we know some of that.
Wait,
Tell
so
the truth. That's one.
That's totally
How do
fine.
you
but this
distinguish?
is-
No. You don't get to
That's
skate over
because
that.
it's a straw
That's
man.
totally
It's a
fine.
straw man of my position. It's a straw man of the argument. So
In
the
what way?
argument
No,
is
wait
that
a sec. You
No, I'm
said
already waiting a
find
second.
one maxim that's transcendent across
I
situations.
didn't say any
just
of
did.
those words. I'm not sure what
Hey,
conversation
rephrase
you're part of.
He's right, actually. He didn't say those words. So who's putting words in whose mouth now? He didn't say, name one thing which is transcendently true. He said that of all God's moral commands, wouldn't we expect, if he's a perfect, unchanging being, for them all to apply across time equally?
Would a flawless thing say, here's what's good, here's the absolute good thing to do at all circumstances in time?
This is what Peterson tells us he said.
No, wait a sec. You
I'm
said
already waiting a
find
second.
one maxim that's transcendent across situations.
I didn't say any
just
of
did.
those.
And he points out rightfully that that's just not what he said. And I can imagine this would be quite frustrating, which is probably why he then said, I don't know what conversation you're a part of. But then Peterson just isn't having any of it.
I didn't say any
just
of
did.
those words. I'm not sure what
Hey,
conversation
rephrase
you're a part of.
Don't be a smartass.
I'm sorry.
Why not?
Seriously, I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation, conduct yourself properly.
Okay.
Okay. Rephrase your question so that because I must
Sure.
have missed it, I
So-
tried to answer it.
Like, I understand if somebody has really poor discursive etiquette, if they're being really rude, it can be good to give them a bit of a dressing down. But look, okay, I don't think this is the most generous and charitable conversation that I've ever seen, but I don't think this guy is, like, being really rude. And to the extent that he is, I can see why he's getting frustrated.
Rephrase your question so that because I must
Sure.
have missed it, I
So-
tried to answer it.
So in my mind, I guess by my lights, a perfect being doesn't change. A perfect being, if they're maximally good, maximally moral,
Does our understanding of the perfect being change?
our understanding might, but
Okay, how
presumably
do we
what the perfect
distinguish?
being
How do
is
we distinguish?
revealing.
Well, I agree. How do we distinguish between that though at the human level?
How do
So
we distinguish between whether
between our transforming understanding of perfection and perfection itself?
between our
We can only, we can only
presumably
see
a
through our
perfect
own
being,
lenses.
presumably a perfect being would be revealing all of these aspects all the time, especially if God's outside of time. I don't know how a God who's outside of
How-
time
how does
is
something-
revealing different things at different times. That just seems like incoherent to me.
Imagine something that's perfect
Sure,
and complete.
sure,
Okay, and it's trying to communicate with creatures who are anything but that.
sure,
Well, they're going to get it wrong.
sure.
Okay, now wait a sec. Do you blame that on the interpreters or the phenomena itself?
Wait, but who's getting it wrong here? Peterson responds that our understanding of that perfect being might change throughout time. But what about the people who wrote it down in the first instance? Was their understanding correct or not? Because they recorded this command of God, which was to slaughter innocent children. Were they somehow misinterpreting God? If they were, then the text they wrote down, which is now part of the scriptural canon, is unreliable. Or maybe Peterson is talking about us today misinterpreting the Bible. The argument would have then changed from what it was before, okay, this happened, but there was important historical context, to, well, we don't really know what happened there because we're probably misinterpreting it today. Or maybe we are misinterpreting it, but then how do you think we should interpret it? Again, Dr. Peterson, we have a text here in which God commands the slaughter of innocent children. Maybe we're somehow misinterpreting it, but if so, I really want you to tell us how you think we should be interpreting this text. I mean, I think the real problem here is that Peterson is just not telling us what he believes. And, I mean, he's under no obligation to tell anyone what he believes. At one point, he even reprimands someone for expecting him to tell them what he believes.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to
You
tell
could be you. You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression that I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
But then again, the question becomes, like, what are you doing here? If you want to
Yeah.
have a long-form conversation which gets into the intricacies of the nature of belief and morality, this really just kind of isn't the format for you. And forget just the format. If the specific discussion is supposed to be one Christian surrounded by like 25 atheists, and you won't call yourself a Christian, what are you doing here? Anyway, look, I obviously haven't covered everything here. The video is like an hour and a half long, so I've tried my best to give something of an overview, I guess. Some of it might make sense to you, some of it might not, and you might also think that I've missed some really important moments. Chances are, if I have, it's because I just think I've got nothing interesting to say about them, at least not anything that someone else hasn't already said. But hopefully you can see that while I do generally agree with the consensus that this was a bit of a disaster, I do think Peterson brings some interesting points to the table, and there were moments where I think he was just being misunderstood. Having said that, I do think he could have done a better job of clarifying those misunderstandings, and certainly
not
he could have
being-
done a better job of clarifying his positions on anything. And I can also see why at the end of the episode, given the opportunity to choose somebody to have another conversation with, he chose Xena, because not only did she have the most productive conversation with him and the one that seemed the least hostile, she also seemed to understand his religious worldview the best and offer what I think is the best objection to it. And I guess that part of the reason why I wanted to make this response is that because of the quick-fire format of this Jubilee Surrounded series, you could have missed that this was quite an important interaction right there in the middle of the episode. But okay, that's that.
Okay.
Cliff and Stuart Connectly, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Alex.
How did I do? Did I get it right?
Awesome, nailed it.
Yeah,
First
okay.
time.
Okay, good. We're going to dive right into the deep end here. What is, if you had to summarize, the ultimate two-sentence blurb summary of what Christianity is all about? What's its main message?
That God created us to love Him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah, no.